The university campus burst with the usual chaos of midterm season. Students hunched over textbooks in the library, coffee cups littering every surface, and the faint hum of stress in the air. Ryan adjusted the strap of her backpack as she hurried across the quad. Her sneakers scuffing against the pavement. She was late for her literature seminar. And the last thing she needed was another reason for Professor Kim to call her out in front of the class. Especially with him there, Kim Taehyung. The name alone made her jaw clench. He lounged against the wall near the lecture hall entrance, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he scrolled through his phone. Looking effortlessly cool in his oversized hoodie and ripped jeans. He was the kind of guy who could make anything look intentional. Like he'd rolled out of bed and still managed to be the most infuriatingly attractive person in a 5 mile radius. Vine hated that about him. She hated a lot of things about him, actually. It had started in their first semester. They'd been paired for a group project in Intro to Philosophy. And Taehyung had shown up late, contributed nothing, and then had the audacity to take credit for her work during the presentation. She'd call him out in front of everyone, and he'd just smirked that stupid, lopsided grin of his and said, "Relax, Wine, it's not that deep." From that day on, it was war. He teased her relentlessly. Mocking her notes, stealing her pens, calling her Miss Perfect in that infuriatingly smooth voice. She'd retaliate by pointing out every flaw in his arguments during class debates, relishing the way his smirk faltered when she outsmarted him. But there were moments, small, confusing moments, that didn't fit the narrative of their rivalry. Like the time she tripped on the stairs outside the science building, her books scattering everywhere, and Taehyung had been the first to stop. He knelt down, gathering her things without a word, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her the last notebook. Watch where you're going, clumsy, he'd muttered, but his tone lacked its usual bite. Or the night she'd been walking home from the library alone in the dark. And he'd appeared out of nowhere, falling into step beside her. It's late, he'd said, hands shoved in his pockets. You shouldn't be out here by yourself. She'd snapped that she could handle it. But he'd stayed anyway, silent until she reached her dorm. These moments gnawed at her. They made her feel something, a flicker of warmth she didn't want to name, buried beneath layers of irritation and pride. She told herself it was nothing. End of story. Today, though, she had no time for his games. She brushed past him into the lecture hall, ignoring the way he called after her. She slid into her seat, pulling out her notebook as Professor Kim began droning on about Shakespearean tragedies. Taehyung sauntered in a minute later, dropping into the chair beside her with a dramatic sigh. She shot him a glare, but he just grinned, leaning closer. Rough morning, he whispered, his breath tickling her ear. Leave me alone, she hissed, scribbling notes with more force than necessary. He chuckled, low and infuriating, but didn't push further. For once, he let her be. She tried to focus on the lecture, but her mind kept drifting to the way his knee brushed hers under the table. To the faint scent of his cologne, she hated herself for noticing. Weeks passed, and their dynamic remained a volatile mix of hostility and unspoken tension. There was a time she'd been concerned by some drunk frat guy at a party she hadn't even wanted to attend. Hyung had appeared out of nowhere, slinging an arm around her shoulders. She's with me, he'd said, his voice casual but firm, steering away before she could protest. She'd shove him off the second they were clear, muttering, I didn't need your help. But her heart had pounded in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Then there was the day she'd forgotten her umbrella during a sudden downpour. She'd stood under the awning of the arts building, resigned to getting soaked. When Taehyung had jogged over, holding his jacket over her head, you're hopeless, he'd said. But he'd walked her to the next class, rain dripping down his face while she stayed dry. She'd mumbled a reluctant thanks, but he just shrugged like it was nothing. Those incidents piled up, a quiet contradiction to their public spats. She didn't know what to make of it. Or of the way her stomach flipped when he looked at her too long. She told herself it was anger. It had to be. The day everything changed started like any other day. The campus was alive with chatter about some big event in the auditorium. A talent show or a fundraiser, she couldn't remember. She had been dragged there by her friend Mina. Who insisted she needed to loosen up. Van stood near the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. Watching students perform half baked skits and off key songs. She was about to leave when she heard his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? Taehyung stood on the makeshift stage, microphone in hand, his grin wide and mischievous. The crowd hushed, drawn in by his effortless charisma. Vine's stomach twisted. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. He scanned the audience, his eyes landing on her. Vian, he said, his voice carrying over murmurs. Come up here. Her heart stopped. She looked up at him, her chest tight with a mix of disbelief and joy, and for once she didn't care who was watching. But then he started laughing. It wasn't a warm laugh or even a nervous one. It was sharp, cutting, the kind that sliced through her like glass. He turned to the crowd, clutching his stomach as if it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Oh my god, thanks for playing along, Ryan. I didn't think you'd actually understand the assignment. The world tilted. She blinked, her smile frozen in place as his words sank in. It was just a prank, he said, still chuckling. You really sold it though. A plus for the efforts. The crowd burst into laughter, some clapping, others whistling. One stood there, the plastic ring cold against her skin, her ears ringing. Humiliation crashed over her like a wave, drowning out the joy she'd felt seconds ago. She looked at Taehyung, searching his face for something, anything, to tell her this wasn't what it seemed. But he was still laughing, wiping a fake tear from his eye, oblivious to the way her hands trembled. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The laughter pressed in on her, suffocating, until all she could do was turn and walk away. She pushed through the crowd, their faces blurring into a sea of mockery, her vision swimming with unshed tears. She didn't stop until she was out of sight, her feet carrying her across the auditorium and into the shadow of a place. Only then did she let herself run, her backpack bouncing against her spine as she fled. Back at the stage, the laughter continued, a few people shouting Taehyung's name like he was some kind of hero. He grinned, soaking it in, but the sound felt hollow now. He glanced towards where Ryan had disappeared, her figure shrinking in the distance, and something twisted in his chest. The grin slipped. Man, you got her so good, one of his friends said, slapping his shoulder. She totally fell for it. Yeah, Taehyung muttered, his voice distant. He could still see her face, the way her eyes had lit up when she'd said yes, the unguarded hope in her smile. And then the way it had shattered, he rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly uneasy. Yeah, she did. The crowd moved on, the next act taking the stage, but Taehyung stayed rooted there, staring after her. He didn't know why he felt bad. It was just a joke, right? She'd get over it. She always did. She was Vian, strong, stubborn, unshakable. Except she hadn't looked unshakable just now. She'd looked broken. He shoved his hand in his pockets, telling himself it didn't matter. She'd hate him more now, and that was fine. That was their thing. But as he walked off the stage, the laughter fading behind him, he couldn't shake the image of her running away or the strange, nagging feeling that he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Vine didn't stop until she reached her dorm, slamming the door behind her and sliding down it to the floor. Her chest heaved, tears spilling over as she ripped the plastic ring off her finger and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a pathetic clatter, a cheap reminder of how stupid she'd been. She buried her face in her hands, the memory of his laughter echoing in her ears. She said yes. She'd meant it in that fleeting, reckless moment, and he'd turned it into a punchline. She hated him. She hated herself more, because even now, through the humiliation and the hurt, that flicker of something wouldn't die. And that was the worst part of all. Hey guys, this is it for the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment down what you think would happen next. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram only at the rate lustrous and I will see you guys in the next video. Till then, keep liking, keep supporting, keep subscribing. Yeah, that's it. Thank you and bye bye.